The first Martians may not be human, not astronauts, not settlers, not families stepping down into red dust beneath a pale alien sky. Machines. Before the first human being ever opens a hatch on Mars, something else may have to arrive first. Starships with no crew inside them, robots that do not need oxygen, power stations unfolding in silence, empty habitats pressurizing themselves for people who are still millions of kilometers away. A construction site with no voices, no footsteps, no windows glowing with life, a city before citizens. That may be how Mars begins. SpaceX will tell you the goal is to make humanity multiplanetary, to put boots on another world, to build a future beyond Earth, and they are not exactly wrong. They are just leaving out the part that has to happen first, the part that does not fit on a stage, the part that takes years before anyone is allowed to step down a ramp on another planet. The part where Mars has to be prepared from a distance. And that preparation has a name that almost no one says out loud. Not exploration, not settlement, not even colonization. The honest word is logistics. Power that has to be waiting, shelter that has to be waiting, communications that have to be waiting. And one thing more important than any of those, return fuel. Methane and oxygen, slowly manufactured from the air and ice of a dead planet, before any human being trusts a ship to carry them home. A factory on Mars whose only purpose is to make the way back possible, built by machines, tended by machines, filled, tank by tank, by machines that may have been waiting alone for years before the first crew ever launches. That is the strange truth beneath the dream. The first chapter of a human future on another planet may have no humans in it at all. It may be written by cargo manifests, landing software, robot joints, solar arrays and tanks, slowly filling under a colder sun. So tonight we're going to follow the plan beneath the dream. The starships that must launch and return. The robots that may have to land first. The power that must come before life. The fuel that must be made before anyone arrives. The first base that may have to survive alone. Settle in. Mars is still waiting. The machines have not left yet. And the road to the first city on another planet may begin with no human footsteps at all. Now let us begin. Before there is a city on Mars, there is only Mars. A cold sphere moving through the dark, half the size of Earth, rust-coloured from orbit, ancient on the surface, wrapped in an atmosphere so thin it feels less like air than the memory of air. From far away it looks almost familiar. There are valleys, mountains, cliffs, clouds, polar caps, dry riverbeds, dunes, plains, dust storms, seasons, sunsets. It is not a gas giant. It is not hidden beneath acid clouds. It is not crushed under an atmosphere thick enough to flatten spacecraft. It is a rocky world, with a day not much longer than our own, with frozen water, with landscapes that sometimes look like deserts on Earth photographed through a dream. And that is the danger of Mars. It looks possible. The moon looks hostile immediately. Grey, airless, close, dead, in a way the mind can understand. Venus announces its violence before any human imagination can soften it. Jupiter and Saturn are not places to stand at all, but Mars sits in the middle distance of human longing, close enough to reach with robots, far enough to remain mythic, empty enough to imagine beginning again. For more than a century, Mars has been the place where humans have projected futures. Canals that were never there, civilizations that never existed, ancient oceans, buried life, domed cities, terraforming machines, first footsteps, first children, a second branch of human history growing under a smaller sun. It is the one planet that seems to invite the sentence, maybe one day. But the surface does not care about maybe. Mars is not awaiting Earth. It is not an unfinished version of home. It is not a frontier in the old human sense of the word. Every frontier human beings have ever entered before, no matter how brutal, still belong to Earth. The Arctic, the Sahara, the Pacific, the Himalayas, the deep ocean, Antarctica. Each of these could kill a person quickly, but each was still part of the same living planet. The air was still air. Gravity was still full. The magnetic field still wrapped the world. The atmosphere still pressed against the skin. The biology of the human body still made sense in the environment around it. Mars breaks that continuity. A human being standing unprotected on the Martian surface would not be exploring. They would be dying. Not dramatically, not cinematically, not with time to admire the horizon. The pressure is too low. The air is mostly carbon dioxide, the cold is severe. The radiation environment is harsher than Earth's. The soil is not soil in the way a farmer means soil. It is regolith, dusty and chemically difficult, filled with problems that would have to be understood before anyone tried to grow food from it. Everything alive has to be enclosed. Every breath has to be manufactured. Every litre of water has to be found, carried, recycled, melted, purified, protected, or made useful. Every watt of power matters. Every moving part becomes important. Every seal becomes a boundary between a person and an environment that cannot forgive even small mistakes. This is why Mars is not only a place. Mars is a test of systems. A city on Earth can begin roughly. People can arrive before the buildings are perfect. They can build with local materials. They can breathe while they work. They can drink from rivers, dig wells, cut timber, grow food, make fire, repair tools, walk to neighbours, send for help, learn from mistakes, and survive a certain amount of disorder. A city on Mars cannot begin that way. Mars gives almost nothing for free. It gives a surface, gravity, carbon dioxide, dust, rock, cold, some water, locked away in ice or minerals, sunlight, weaker than Earth's but still present, a sky, a horizon, a place to land. Everything else has to come from somewhere else, or be made from what little the planet offers. That is the first truth behind the idea that machines may go first. It is not because robots are more inspiring than humans. They are not. It is not because a machine stepping onto Mars would satisfy the ancient desire to see a human being stand beneath another sky. It would not. The reason is colder and more practical. Machines can be risked before people can. A robot can fail without warning. A cargo ship can crash and still teach. A fuel plant can stop working and become a lesson. A solar array can jam, a rover can freeze, a battery can die, a starship can tip over, and the result may be expensive, painful, and embarrassing. But it is not the same as losing a crew. Mars requires rehearsal, and the rehearsal cannot happen fully on Earth. You can test engines in Texas, you can test tanks under pressure, you can test robotics in factories, you can simulate dust, cold, delay, and radiation. You can build chambers, analog habitats, vacuum systems, desert test sites, software models, and robotic competitions. But at some point, the actual planet becomes the only true test environment. Mars has to be allowed to judge the machines. This is where the dream becomes strange. The first serious steps toward a human Mars settlement may be taken with no humans present. They may be taken by hardware, learning how badly it has been underestimated. A lander discovering that the dust behaves differently than expected. A robot discovering that a slope is softer than it looked from orbit. A power system discovering that deployment is not the same thing as survival. A fuel reactor discovering that chemistry works on paper more cleanly than it works in dust, cold, and delay. And still, this is how it would have to begin, because the first human mission to Mars cannot arrive like Apollo arrived at the Moon. Apollo was extraordinary, but it was brief. The astronauts crossed the distance, landed, explored, collected, lifted off, and came home. The mission was dangerous, but it was short enough to remain self-contained. The Moon was visited. It did not have to become a place that supported them. Mars is different because Mars demands duration. The trip alone may take months. The stay may last many months more, depending on the mission architecture and the alignment of the planets. The return depends on windows, fuel, health, systems, weather, power, and the condition of equipment that may have been waiting for years. A crewed Mars landing is not one event. It is the centre of a chain, and every link in that chain has to hold. This is why the first base on Mars, if it comes, may not look like a base at first. It may look like scattered hardware, a landed starship, a power unit, a cargo container, a communications mast, a rover, a robot, a buried cable, a tank farm, a fuel plant beginning to work slowly in the cold, an empty habitat sitting sealed under the dust, waiting for pressure, warmth, and voices. It may be ugly, it may be temporary, it may be half-buried, improvised, industrial, and silent. But if it keeps working, it becomes something profound. A place, not a city yet, not home, not civilization, but a place prepared by intention. That is what has to exist before people can arrive with any hope of staying. Not paradise, not safety, not comfort, just continuity. The first faint line between one launch window and the next. The first proof that a machine can land, survive, report, recharge, and wait. In that sense, the first Martian will not necessarily be the first being to walk there. It may be the first system that continues, the first machine that refuses to die, the first piece of infrastructure that remains alive long enough for the next piece to join it. And this is why the story has to begin not with the astronaut, but with the planet before the people. With Mars as it is, not Mars as we want it to be. Cold, beautiful, empty, resistant. A world that has spent billions of years without us and will not become human simply because a rocket can reach it. Mars does not need a visitor. Mars needs preparation, and preparation requires a machine that is not supposed to fly once and disappear, but fly again and again, carrying the weight of a civilization in pieces. That machine is Starship, but to understand the plan, we have to stop thinking of it as a rocket. Picture a silver vehicle standing in the coastal flatness of South Texas, tall enough to make human beings beside it look temporary. Stainless steel skin, black thermal tiles, frost forming in white sheets as cryogenic propellant chills the tanks, engines clustered beneath it like the roots of some impossible metallic tree, a launch tower beside it, ground systems feeding it, roads, cranes, tanks, pipes, flame trenches, cameras, workers, software, weather constraints, checklists, and a coastline that has slowly become one of the strangest construction sites on Earth. It is easy to look at Starship and see a rocket. That is not quite what SpaceX is trying to build. A rocket is an object. Starship is intended to become a system. That distinction matters because Mars does not need an object. Mars needs a route. Most rockets in human history have been closer to rituals than vehicles. They were assembled, fueled, launched, and partly thrown away. Even the most advanced missions were rare, expensive, fragile events. A launch was a date, a mission patch, a control room, a countdown, a plume rising into the sky, a payload delivered, a vehicle spent. That model can explore. It cannot build a city on another planet. For Mars, the rocket cannot remain a monument to rarity. It has to become transport, repeated transport, cargo transport, refueling transport, failed test and try again transport. A way to move mass not once, but again and again, through the narrow gates opened by planetary alignment. This is the core of Starship's ambition. SpaceX describes the Starship and Super Heavy system as fully reusable, built to carry crew and cargo to Earth orbit, the Moon, Mars, and beyond. The phrase sounds like marketing until you sit with what it implies. Fully reusable does not just mean cheaper launches in an abstract sense. It means the vehicle is meant to survive its own mission and become available for another one. It means launch is no longer the end of the hardware story. It means the system is trying to move spaceflight from expedition toward logistics. And logistics is what Mars requires. A human settlement is not made from inspiration. It is made from mass. Heavy, inconvenient, unromantic mass. Pressure vessels, tanks, pipes, batteries, solar panels, radiators, insulation, food, filters, pumps, valves, medical kits, tools, computers, spare parts for the spare computers, cables, seals, bolts, wheels, motors, antennas, fabrics, suits, airlocks, excavation equipment, chemical reactors, storage racks, replacement joints for robots, replacement lenses for cameras, heaters, cleaning systems, waste systems, water recovery systems. The things that never appear in the dream are the things that keep the dream alive. Every city begins this way. Before the street, the warehouse. Before the home, the shipment. Before the school, the tools. Before the hospital, the inventory. Before there is culture, there is supply. On Earth, this is easy to forget because the supply chain is already everywhere. A city does not feel like a machine, but it is one. Food moves in, waste moves out, water is treated, power is generated, roads are repaired, broken parts are replaced, fuel is delivered, data flows. People sleep inside systems they rarely notice unless those systems fail. Mars would make every system visible. If the oxygen system fails, there is no outside air to open a window to. If the water system fails, there is no river nearby. If the power fails, cold becomes immediate. If the communications fail, the base becomes alone. If the return fuel is not available, The mission changes from a visit into a waiting problem. This is why Starship's scale matters. Not because bigger is automatically better, but because Mars punishes small payloads. A small lander can perform science, a rover can study geology, a helicopter can scout, a probe can listen to wind. But a settlement needs the kind of mass that changes a landscape. Cargo measured not in kilograms alone, but eventually in tons, hundreds of tons, then thousands, then perhaps millions if the dream is taken literally. SpaceX's own Mars vision describes a self-sufficient city as requiring upwards of 1 million people and millions of tons of cargo delivered to the Red Planet. That number is almost too large to feel real. Millions of tons, not one heroic mission, not 10. Not even a handful of expeditions spaced out over decades. A city-scale project means transport at a scale no human space program has ever attempted beyond Earth orbit. That is why Starship cannot be understood as the Mars ship. It has to be understood as the first attempt at a Mars shipping system. And that system depends on one of the least glamorous ideas in the whole architecture: refilling in orbit. A Starship leaving Earth cannot simply lift everything it needs from the ground in one elegant motion and go directly to Mars with a city inside it. The energy cost is too high, the propellant demands are too large, the payload ambitions are too heavy, so SpaceX's plan depends on launching additional Starships that act as tankers, transferring propellant in Earth orbit before the Mars-bound ship departs. This turns a single Mars departure into a choreography. The cargo ship launches, tankers launch, propellant is transferred, cryogenic fluids have to be managed in orbit, the receiving ship has to be filled, timing has to work, hardware has to dock, connect, pump, separate and continue. Only then does the Mars-bound vehicle become what the animation shows from the beginning, a ship ready to leave Earth. The public sees one arrow pointing to Mars. The engineering sees a chain of events that must happen before the arrow begins, and each event is a point where the plan can fail. This is why the first years of Starship are so important. Every test flight, every engine issue, every tile loss, every booster catch attempt, every landing burn, every propellant transfer test, every rapid reuse goal, all of it belongs to the same larger question. Can a rocket become reliable enough, reusable enough, and frequent enough to behave like infrastructure? Infrastructure is not impressive because it works once. Infrastructure is impressive because it keeps working. A bridge that holds for one crossing is not a transportation system. A train that completes one route is not a railroad. A port that unloads one ship is not global trade. The miracle is repetition, the ordinary miracle, the kind that becomes invisible because it works often enough. Mars requires that kind of miracle. If Starship flies once to Mars, lands, and never repeats, it becomes history. If Starship can send cargo every window, learn, return data, improve, send more cargo, and eventually carry people to a prepared site, it becomes something else. A line between worlds. Thin at first, fragile, expensive, dangerous, but a line. That is the part that makes the plan so strange. SpaceX is not only trying to send a spacecraft to Mars, it is trying to make Mars reachable often enough that failure does not end the story. It is trying to create a system in which one lost ship is painful but not final, one broken robot is a lesson but not a cancellation, one missed window delays the plan but does not erase it. That is what a civilization-level project requires: redundancy, cadence, mass, and patience. This is also why the first human crews, if they come, are unlikely to be the true beginning. By the time people arrive, the more important beginning should already have happened. Hardware should already be on the surface, landing data should already exist, communications should be tested, power should be measured through actual Martian days and nights, dust should have already had time to interfere, machines should already have failed in ways engineers can study. A human crew should not arrive to find Mars untouched. They should arrive to find evidence. Evidence that the transport system can reach the planet. Evidence that large vehicles can survive landing. Evidence that power systems can operate. Evidence that machines can wake up, move, transmit, and endure. Evidence that Mars can hold the first pieces of a human-made system without immediately destroying them. This is the real threshold. Not reaching Mars, leaving something useful there. A rocket can reach, a system can return, a system can carry, a system can build continuity between one window and the next. And this brings us to the quiet clock behind the entire plan, the rhythm that no billionaire, engineer, president or astronaut controls. The one thing every Mars program has to obey: the planets themselves. Because Mars is not always waiting at the same distance. The door opens, then it closes. And if the machines are not ready when it opens, the dream waits years before it can try again. There is a clock inside the Mars dream, but it does not tick in seconds. It ticks in planets. Earth moves around the sun faster than Mars. Mars travels farther out, slower, colder, following its own long path through the dark. Sometimes the two worlds are close enough in the practical language of mission design to make the journey efficient. Sometimes Mars is on the far side of the sun, and the distance becomes too punishing for the kind of spacecraft humans can reasonably build today. The result is a rhythm. Roughly every 26 months, a favourable launch window opens. For a short time, Earth and Mars are positioned in a way that allows spacecraft to follow an efficient transfer path from one orbit to the other. Not a straight line, because planets do not wait in space like targets. A spacecraft does not aim at where Mars is. It aims at where Mars will be. It leaves Earth, falls around the Sun, and meets another moving world months later. Like a thrown stone trying to rendezvous with a bird in flight. This is one of the first ways Mars refuses to behave like a normal destination. On Earth, transportation is forgiving by comparison. A ship delayed by a week may leave the next week. A truck can take another road. A plane can often fly tomorrow. A train can be rescheduled. Modern life has trained us to imagine distance as a problem that can be negotiated with money, machinery, and time. Mars offers a different bargain. If you miss the window, you may not be late by a day. You may be late by 2 years. That fact changes everything. It changes engineering. It changes funding. It changes manufacturing. It changes risk. It changes the psychology of the people building the mission. A delay that would be annoying on Earth can become enormous in interplanetary planning. A late valve, a failed test, a damaged engine, a software problem, a regulatory pause, an explosion on a launch pad, a problem with orbital refilling. Any one of these can push a mission beyond the window and force the entire sequence to wait for the planets to come around again. The planets do not negotiate. This is why SpaceX's Mars ambitions have always been tied to windows. It is also why reports about uncrewed Starship flights to Mars are so focused on the late 2026 opportunity. That window matters because it is not merely a date on a corporate timeline. It is a gate in celestial mechanics. If the ship is not ready, the gate closes. The next serious chance moves outward, and the dream becomes older before it has even begun. Mars settlement, if it ever starts, will therefore happen in pulses, not continuously. A window opens, vehicles depart, months pass, they arrive, some succeed, some fail, data returns, engineers redesign, another window approaches, more cargo is prepared, another departure, another cruise, another landing, another long wait. This is not the clean motion of a promotional animation. It is an intermittent heartbeat. And in the early years, that heartbeat will be fragile. The first Mars-bound starships would not be building a city in the way people imagine cities. They would be testing whether the heartbeat can exist at all. Can the vehicle leave Earth after orbital refilling? Can it survive the cruise? Can it enter the Martian atmosphere? Can it land upright? Can it communicate? Can it deliver cargo? Can anything on board operate after landing? Can the next window build on what the previous window left behind? That last question may matter most, because Mars plans have to compound. A single successful landing is not enough. A single working robot is not enough. A single solar array, a single cargo container, a single tank, a single antenna. None of these is a settlement. They become meaningful only if the next mission can use them. Then the next. Then the next. Mars infrastructure is not one object. It is accumulation. One window sends proof. The next sends reinforcement. The next sends systems that depend on the proof and reinforcement. The next may send humans if enough of the previous steps survived. That sequence sounds logical when spoken from Earth. Mars will test every part of it. A cargo ship might land, but too far from the chosen site. It survives, but its usefulness is reduced. A robot might power on, but fail after a dust storm. A solar array might deploy, but slowly lose output as dust accumulates. A fuel plant might work in a laboratory, then underperform in the actual thermal and chemical conditions of Mars. A storage tank might hold pressure, but not long enough. A communications mast might work perfectly until the cold begins changing materials in tiny ways no simulation captured. This is the power of Mars as a real place. It edits the plan. Every mission sent there comes back in data as a correction to human imagination. The launch window also creates a strange emotional pressure. For a human crew, it means that going to Mars is not like going to the Moon. The Moon is close enough that mission timelines can be flexible in comparison. Mars is governed by orbital geometry. A crew that lands there cannot simply decide to come home because the mission feels too hard. The return window has to exist. The return vehicle has to be ready. The propellant has to be available. The crew has to remain healthy long enough for the planets to allow departure. Mars is not just far away. Mars is scheduled by the sky. This is why the machines must go first. They are the only reasonable way to use the early windows without risking human lives. The first opportunities can be spent learning, testing, breaking hardware, landing badly, landing well, measuring dust, checking power budgets, trying to move cargo, attempting autonomous work, watching what survives through the long silence after arrival. The machines can wait for the next window. Humans may not be able to. An empty base that survives for 26 months is not empty in the strategic sense. It is doing something deeply important. It is proving continuity. It is showing that the surface can hold equipment between windows. It is becoming the first bridge across the gaps imposed by celestial mechanics. Think of that for a moment. A machine lands on Mars. The window closes behind it. For more than 2 years, nothing large may come. It sits through sols and nights, through wind, dust, cold, weak sunlight, and silence. It checks its power. It sends data. It waits for Earth and Mars to move back into the right relationship. It is not merely waiting for another spacecraft. It is holding the place. That may be the first real act of settlement. Not building a dome, not planting a flag, not broadcasting a speech. Holding the place until the next arrival. The ancient human version of this was leaving a camp intact. A shelter, a cache, a marker, a pile of stones, a fire ring, something that said, "We were here and we may come back." On Mars, the marker cannot simply be symbolic. It has to function. It has to generate power, transmit data, survive cold, maybe produce fuel, maybe protect cargo, maybe guide incoming ships. The first campfire on Mars may be an electrical system. The first trail marker may be a radio beacon. The first shelter may sit empty. This is why the 26-month rhythm is not just a scheduling detail. It is the architecture of the whole dream. It determines how quickly a base can grow, how long early systems must survive alone, how much redundancy is needed, how many cargo ships must be sent before humans, how painful a failure becomes, how much patience the dream requires. It also makes the plan vulnerable to a very human problem: impatience. Mars inspires speeches faster than it accepts hardware. It is easy to say the words, "City on Mars, million people, multi-planetary civilization." It is harder to wait through window after window, each one separated by more than 2 years, each one demanding more proof, more reliability, more cargo, more money, more restraint. But restraint may be what makes the dream possible. Send machines first, let them fail first. Let Mars break metal before it breaks people. Let each window answer one layer of the question: can we get there? Can we land? Can we survive? Can we work? Can we make fuel? Can we wait? Can we send more? Only after those questions have been answered does the human question become serious. And even then, the planet will not be conquered by arrival. It will only be entered. Because reaching Mars is a moment, staying there is a rhythm, and that rhythm begins with cargo. No human being should be the first thing a dead planet receives. Not if the goal is survival. The first things should be metal, tanks, cables, batteries, antennas, heaters, pressure vessels, tools, spare parts, solar arrays, cargo containers, excavation systems, chemical reactors, and machines that can fail without turning the future into a memorial. This is the cold logic beneath every serious Mars settlement plan. Cargo has to go first because Mars is not a destination in the ordinary sense. It is a dependency problem. A person on Mars depends on more systems than a person almost anywhere else humans have imagined going. Pressure, oxygen, carbon dioxide removal, temperature control. radiation protection, water recovery, food storage, power, waste handling, medical supplies, communications, navigation, mobility, dust control, fire suppression, psychological support, emergency shelter, return capability. Each dependency is invisible until it fails. On Earth, the largest life support system is the planet itself. The atmosphere presses gently on the body. Oxygen is already mixed into the air. Water cycles through clouds, rivers, ice, soil, and oceans. The magnetic field and atmosphere soften radiation. The biosphere produces food. Gravity holds us in the conditions our bodies understand. Even in the harshest places, humans remain inside the larger mercy of Earth. Mars removes that mercy. The settlement must become the mercy. That means cargo is not secondary. Cargo is the beginning of habitability. Before the first human crew leaves Earth, the question cannot simply be whether their spacecraft can reach Mars. It has to be whether Mars has already received enough equipment to make their arrival rational. A crew arriving to nothing would have to trust every survival function to what they carried with them. That may be possible for a short mission in theory, but it does not resemble settlement. It resembles a dangerous visit with no margin. A settlement needs margin. Margin means backups, extra power, extra seals, extra filters, extra tools, extra ways to communicate, extra ways to stay warm, extra ways to move, extra ways to make oxygen, extra ways to leave. Mars will consume margin quietly. A dust storm reduces solar output. A joint wears faster than expected. A rover wheel is damaged. A tank valve leaks. A heater draws more energy than planned. A cable becomes brittle. A sensor gets coated. A software fault causes a system to enter safe mode. A habitat pressure test reveals a slow leak. None of these sounds like the end of a civilization, but on Mars, small failures can gather into something larger. Cargo is how you fight that gathering. Not with heroism, with inventory. There is a sentence that sounds dull on Earth and profound on Mars. We brought another one, another pump, another filter, another cable, another battery, another pressure regulator, another tool, another robot joint, another communications unit, another spool of wire, another food package, another oxygen tank, another set of seals. Civilization at the beginning may look like spare parts. This is why the first cargo waves would have to carry the least glamorous objects imaginable, not monuments, not laboratories full of discovery, not the polished interiors of a future city. Instead, the things that keep people alive when the beautiful systems stop being beautiful. Power systems would come early, because without power almost nothing else matters. Communications would come early, because an isolated base that cannot talk to Earth becomes a silent risk. Landing aids might come early, because later ships need to arrive near the earlier ones. Surface mobility systems would come early, because cargo that cannot be moved is only partly useful. Storage systems would come early, because Mars will damage anything left carelessly exposed. Fuel production hardware would come early, because returning home may depend on it. This is the logic that changes the emotional meaning of the first missions. A starship landing on Mars with no people inside may look, to some viewers, like a lesser achievement than a crewed landing. In one sense, it is. No human steps out. No voice speaks from the surface. No face appears behind a visor. No one becomes the first person to see Mars with human eyes from the ground. But in another sense, the empty ship is more honest. It admits that Mars cannot be entered safely by romance. The ship lands to test the planet. It becomes a warehouse, a beacon, a data source, maybe a power platform, maybe a shelter, maybe a pile of lessons. Its purpose is not to inspire for one day. Its purpose is to remain useful. Usefulness is the first form of settlement. A cargo ship that survives becomes a stored possibility. A container becomes future work. A power system becomes the first pulse. An antenna becomes the first voice. A robot becomes the first hand. A fuel plant becomes the first promise that arrival does not have to mean exile. That return fuel question sits at the center of the Mars plan. A mission that lands humans on Mars but cannot bring them back is not an exploration mission in the normal sense. It is a one-way migration or a catastrophe waiting to be narrated politely. If the goal is a credible two-way system, then propellant matters enormously. Carrying all return propellant from Earth makes the mission heavier and more expensive. Producing fuel on Mars, using local resources, is the more elegant and more difficult solution. This is why Mars is often discussed as a place where fuel could be made from the planet itself. Carbon dioxide is abundant in the Martian atmosphere. Water exists in ice. Combine carbon dioxide and hydrogen, and one can imagine producing methane and oxygen through chemical processes studied for in situ resource utilization. Methane and oxygen are also the propellant Starship is designed around. The idea is beautiful. The reality is brutal. A fuel plant on Mars would have to land, deploy, draw power, gather feedstock, process it, store cryogenic propellant, manage temperature, avoid contamination, survive dust, and keep operating without nearby human repair. It would have to turn a thin atmosphere and buried or imported hydrogen sources into the practical difference between going home and not going home. That is why one of the first factories on Mars may not make bricks or food or scientific samples. It may make a way back. Think about what that means. Before humans can confidently arrive, a machine may need to sit on Mars and slowly manufacture the possibility of their departure. The return journey has to be born before the arrival becomes sane. That is the kind of sentence that reveals how strange this whole project is. Mars settlement is not only about getting humans there. It is about making sure they are not trapped by their own achievement. It is about sending enough cargo ahead that the first crew lands not at the edge of a dream, but inside a prepared system with a path home. And that path home cannot be improvised after the fact. It has to be waiting. Cargo first also changes what success looks like. The first missions do not need to look spectacular to matter. A solar array deploying correctly may be more important than a cinematic rover shot. A pressure vessel holding over a Martian winter may be more important than a dramatic panorama. A robot successfully connecting a cable may matter more than a flag. A fuel plant producing a small amount of methane may become more historic than almost any image if it proves the chemistry and hardware can work on the actual planet. Mars will reward the boring victories, the quiet ones, the ones that look like maintenance. And perhaps this is why the public imagination has trouble holding the real sequence. We want the human moment. We want the first boot print, the first sentence, the first face, the first shaky video from the surface. But the planet demands something slower. It demands that the first human moment be earned by years of non-human preparation. A base may have to sit empty. That idea is eerie, but it may be necessary. An empty base is not a failure if it is waiting successfully. It is a pressure system holding, a battery charging, an antenna listening, a cargo store intact, a robot in standby, a fuel tank slowly filling, a place being kept alive for people who are not there yet. The first city on Mars may begin as a place with no one inside it. No laughter, no cooking, no footsteps in corridors, no private conversations, no sleeping crew, no one looking out at the horizon after a long day. Only systems, only the hum of equipment if sound could carry in the right way, only heaters keeping the cold away from parts that matter, only telemetry packets leaving the surface and crossing space, only dust tapping against metal, only machinery waiting through night after night, and if it survives, then the next window changes. The next mission is no longer going to untouch Mars. It is going to a place where something human-made is still alive. That is the first thread of continuity. That is the difference between a landing site and the beginning of a base. Cargo goes first because continuity must go first. The machines must create a reason for humans to trust the ground beneath them. And among all the cargo that might be sent, one possibility has captured attention more than the others. Not because it is the most important machine necessarily, not because it is guaranteed to work, but because it looks enough like us to make the future feel suddenly close and strangely unsettling. A humanoid robot. A machine that may become the first crew-like passenger to Mars. Imagine the first passenger to Mars stepping out of a spacecraft and not needing air. No lungs opening against a pressure suit. No heartbeat rising in the silence. No blood carrying oxygen through a body that evolved under blue skies. No fear of decompression. No panic at the sight of a horizon. No human nervous system has ever processed directly. No childhood memory of Earth. No family waiting for a voice call delayed by the geometry of planets. A machine. A human-shaped machine moving carefully down a ramp into red dust, while Earth watches through a delayed signal and tries to understand what kind of moment it is seeing. Not the first human on Mars, not even close. Something earlier, something stranger, a rehearsal shaped like a person, sent into a place still too uncertain for people themselves. That is why the idea of sending Tesla's Optimus robot on an early Starship mission matters. Not because Optimus is guaranteed to build Mars, it is not. Not because a humanoid robot is automatically the best tool for the surface, it may not be. Not because the first machine will stride across the planet like a science fiction worker in a polished promotional film, it almost certainly will not. The importance is symbolic and structural. A robot going first makes the hidden logic visible. Machines before humans, testing before settlement, work before romance. Elon Musk has suggested that an early uncrewed Starship mission to Mars could carry Tesla's humanoid robot Optimus, with humans following only if those initial landings succeed. Reporting has also described the idea of one or more Optimus robots acting as a kind of simulated crew. That phrase is easy to pass over, but it is one of the strangest phrases in the entire Mars story. A simulated crew, not alive, not conscious in the human sense, not risking death, but occupying the role where a human might one day be, experiencing the flight, the landing, the surface environment, the delay, the dust, the cold, and the limitations of operating so far from Earth. A robot can ride where a person should not yet ride. That is the point. Before a human crew enters a system, the system should be made to prove itself. The vehicle should prove it can travel. The landing should prove it can happen. The surface should prove it can receive hardware. The robot should prove, even modestly, that something shaped for work can survive after arrival. But the word robot can mislead us here. It makes the idea sound more complete than it is. A humanoid machine on Mars would face a world that does not care how impressive it looked on Earth. A factory floor is not Mars. A stage demonstration is not Mars. A warehouse is not Mars. A carefully prepared test environment with engineers nearby, clean surfaces, strong communications, spare parts, and predictable lighting is not Mars. Mars is dust, delay, cold, radiation, uneven ground, weak sunlight, mechanical wear, thermal cycling, and loneliness. Even walking becomes a serious question. The gravity is lower than Earth's, about 38% of what humans feel here, but it is still enough to make falls matter. The ground may be loose, fine dust may hide rocks, slopes may look manageable from orbit and behave differently under the weight of a machine. The humanoid robot has joints, actuators, sensors, cameras, feet, balance systems, thermal limits, power demands, and software assumptions. Mars will test each of them without sympathy. A robot that falls on Earth can be helped up. A robot that falls on Mars has to recover, or it becomes an artifact. This is where the dream becomes delicate. The first humanoid robot on Mars, if it goes, may not do anything dramatic. It may not build a habitat. It may not assemble a fuel plant. It may not walk kilometers across the surface. It may simply power on, check its systems, move cautiously, observe, transmit, perhaps attempt a small task, and survive long enough to teach engineers what the next version must become. That might sound disappointing. It would not be. A machine waking up on Mars and remaining useful would be one of the most important proofs in the entire history of space infrastructure. Not because the machine itself is the city, but because it would show that human-directed labour can begin before humans arrive. That work, however small, can be placed on another planet and continue at a distance. And Mars needs work. Not exploration in the romantic sense. Work. The work of clearing dust, inspecting panels, checking seals, moving cables, opening containers, photographing damage, carrying tools, connecting hoses, reading gauges, standing near equipment after a cold night and reporting whether anything shifted, brushing solar panels, testing a latch, watching a fuel plant, helping unload cargo, walking a route between a ship and a power unit, doing small, repetitive, boring tasks that become priceless because no human is there to do them. On Earth, these tasks are ordinary. On Mars, ordinary becomes historic. The first base will not be built out of grand gestures. It will be built out of maintenance, a connector seated properly, a valve inspected, a cable routed out of the dust, a panel cleaned after a storm, a battery kept warm, a storage container opened without damaging the contents, a ramp cleared, a path marked, a camera repositioned, a broken part identified before the next mission depends on it. Civilization begins as chores. This is one of the most beautiful and humbling truths in the Mars plan. The future people imagine as domes, cities, and children under another sky may depend first on whether a machine can do simple work without anyone standing beside it. and the machine may have to be patient, that may be the quality Mars rewards most. Not speed, not flash, not dramatic intelligence. Patience, caution, the ability to stop before a bad step, to conserve power, to wait through cold, to avoid pulling too hard on a stuck component, to recognize uncertainty, to do less but survive longer. On Earth, we often imagine intelligent machines as fast. On Mars, intelligence may look slow. Do not step there. Do not waste energy. Do not continue the task in bad light. Do not risk the joint. Do not turn a recoverable problem into a permanent failure. The first robot worker on Mars may need the temperament of an astronaut and the humility of a field technician. It may need to understand that the goal is not to look impressive. The goal is to keep the system alive for the next window. This is why Optimus, as an idea, is more interesting than Optimus as a product. The product may or may not be ready. The timeline may slip. The robot may be symbolic on the first flight. The first mission may carry no robot at all, or a different payload, or a machine designed less like a person and more like a specialized tool. All of that is possible. All of that should be said carefully. But the idea reveals the direction. The human shape goes ahead of the human body. That is the haunting part. A robot with 2 arms and 2 legs would carry with it a kind of shadow of us. Not consciousness, not personhood, not the inner life of a traveller, but form, a suggestion, a placeholder for a future astronaut, a machine built in our outline, sent into a world where our actual bodies are still too vulnerable, and that image changes the psychology of Mars. For decades, the human imagination has waited for the first bootprint, the first human face, the first words spoken from the surface. But what if the first unforgettable image is something else? A robot standing beside a starship, a machine looking out over a plain where no person has ever stood, a human-shaped figure under a sky with no human breath beneath it. Would that feel like triumph or like a warning? Maybe both. Because a robot on Mars would say 2 things at once. It would say, "We are getting closer," and it would say, "We are not ready yet." That dual meaning is what makes the moment powerful. The machine is a promise and a confession, a promise that humans may follow, a confession that the planet is still too hard to trust with human life, and if the robot fails, the failure will not necessarily end the dream. It may become part of the dream's education. A fall, a jammed joint, a power problem, a dust-covered sensor, a software fault, a frozen mechanism, each would become data. Each would tell engineers what Mars does to machines that look capable on Earth. A failed robot is a warning left in the dust. A surviving robot is something else. It is the first worker, not the first Martian in the biological sense, not a citizen, not a settler, not a person, but perhaps the first active participant in preparing another planet for human life. And that may be the right way to think about the phrase, first Martians. Maybe the first Martian is not an individual at all. Maybe it is a system that survives, a starship that lands and remains useful, a solar array that keeps producing power, a communications mast that keeps listening, a fuel plant that begins filling tanks, a robot that wakes, moves, stops, waits, and tries again, a cargo base that lasts from one launch window to the next. That is the first Martian presence, not biology, continuity. Mars will not become human because a human arrives. It will become human, if it ever does, because enough human-made systems keep working there long enough for arrival to become survivable. And somewhere inside that long preparation, one machine may wake up alone. It may stand in red dust under a thin sky, beside a ship that crossed millions of kilometers without a crew. It may look around with cameras instead of eyes. It may send a signal home. It may take one careful step. And for the first time, the human future on Mars may move without a human body inside it. That is where the story becomes larger than one robot, one company, or one launch window. Because if machines go first, then the first city on Mars will not begin with people building machines. It will begin with machines building the conditions for people. And that means the next question is not whether a robot can stand on Mars. The next question is whether a base can wake up alone. Before any machine can wake up on Mars, it first has to cross the silence. Not a silence of minutes. Not the silence of a radio blackout behind the moon, where Earth disappears for a little while and then comes back. Mars is something else. A spacecraft leaving Earth for Mars enters a long middle distance between worlds, where the planet it left becomes smaller every day, and the planet it is trying to reach remains, for most of the journey, only a mathematical destination. The cruise to Mars is often described as lasting around 6 or 7 months, depending on the mission design, the launch window, and the trajectory chosen. That number sounds manageable when spoken casually. 7 months is a school year, a winter, a long voyage by sea in another century. But for a spacecraft carrying the first machinery of a future base, 7 months is not simply travel time. It is the first test of whether the system can remain alive without drama. Nothing about the cruise is theatrical. There is no red planet outside the window for most of it. No surface, no dust, no horizon, just trajectory corrections, thermal control, power management, communications checks, software health, propellant behavior, radiation exposure, and the slow passage of a vehicle through interplanetary space. For a human crew, that journey would be psychologically enormous. For a machine, it is still dangerous. Machines do not get lonely, but they do degrade. Electronics are exposed to radiation, materials expand and contract, batteries age, propellants have to be managed, sensors have to remain calibrated. Software has to run without wandering into states no one predicted. A spacecraft that works perfectly on the pad can still discover, halfway between worlds, that deep space is not a place but an environment. That is one of the strange things about Mars. People tend to imagine the hard part as the surface, and the surface is hard. But before the surface, there is the crossing. A ship has to leave Earth, aim not at Mars but at where Mars will be, and arrive months later with enough precision that the atmosphere can catch it rather than destroy it. The spacecraft is not travelling through empty nothing. It is travelling through sunlight, radiation, micrometeoroid risk, temperature changes, communications delay, and the constant requirement to remain oriented, powered, and aware of itself. If the ship is uncrewed, there are no human beings on board to smell smoke, hear a strange vibration, notice frost forming where it should not, or improvise when a display behaves strangely. The system has to monitor itself. It has to know what it is. It has to know, in some limited but vital way, whether it is still healthy enough to continue. A cargo starship bound for Mars would carry more than mass. It would carry waiting. That waiting would begin after Earth departure. The engines would shut down. The planet would recede. The moon would vanish into the same general brightness as everything else near home. The spacecraft would enter cruise, and for months the mission would become almost invisible to the public. No launch plume, no landing video, no astronaut waving from a hatch, just a ship in transit, quietly moving through a volume of space humans have never made routine. This is where the SpaceX Mars idea becomes more fragile than its animation suggests. Animations compress time. They show the ship leaving Earth, then arriving at Mars, as if the voyage itself were a clean line between two meaningful moments. Reality inserts duration, and duration is where systems reveal themselves. A valve that was fine for a week may not be fine after months. A thermal condition that was acceptable in a test may behave differently in flight. A software state that seemed unlikely may become important. A power draw that looked small on paper may accumulate into a constraint. The first cargo ships to Mars, if they fly, will not only be testing landing, they will be testing endurance. Can Starship spend months in deep space and remain ready for the most dangerous part of the mission at the end? Can its systems tolerate the cruise? Can it maintain orientation and communications? Can it preserve whatever cargo it carries? Can the machines inside survive not just launch and landing, but the long quiet between them? This matters especially if the cargo includes robots. A robot sent to Mars is not simply placed in a box and unpacked on arrival, like a tool shipped across an ocean. It has to survive launch vibrations, acceleration, months of flight, thermal changes, radiation, landing shock, and then activation on another world. It has to wake after waiting. It has to become useful after being carried through conditions no ordinary machine on Earth is built to experience. There is something almost mythic in that sequence. A machine built on Earth, sealed into a spacecraft, carried across millions of kilometers, shaken by landing, then asked to stand up in dust beneath another sky. But the myth depends on engineering, and the engineering depends on small things working. A connector that survives vibration, a battery heater that functions, a camera cover that opens, a joint that does not seize, a software process that boots correctly. a communications link that can handle delay, a navigation system that knows where the sun is, a power system that understands how to conserve itself through the first Martian night. The first machine on Mars does not need to be heroic. It needs to wake. That waking is harder than it sounds. On Earth, waking a machine is usually surrounded by help. Engineers can stand near it, power can be checked, a cable can be replaced, a button can be pressed again, a diagnostic tool can be plugged in, a failed startup can be repeated. On Mars, the startup sequence is a lonely event. If it fails, Earth may know only through absence. No signal, no movement, no image, no confirmation that anything on the surface is alive. Silence can become data, but it is a cruel kind of data. And this is why the 7-month cruise is not merely a bridge to the story. It is part of the story. It is the first long demonstration that the machines can be trusted with time. Not minutes, not hours, months. The kind of time human beings are bad at respecting because nothing visible seems to happen, while everything important is quietly being tested. The cruise also changes the emotional stakes of failure. A rocket that fails on launch fails in front of everyone. A vehicle that fails during landing fails in a dramatic moment. But a spacecraft that slowly loses capability between planets may fail almost invisibly. A number drifting, a pressure changing, a temperature outside its expected range, a fault mode entered and never cleared. The dream does not always break loudly. Sometimes it simply stops responding. That possibility has to be part of the Mars story because Mars is not only a place of spectacular danger, it is a place of patient danger. It waits. It allows time to weaken things. It lets dust settle, batteries drain, joints cool, seals age, software drift, and plans become more complicated. For a human mission, the 7-month crossing would be a test of bodies and minds. For a machine mission, it is a test of systems and design honesty. The question is not whether SpaceX can launch something powerful. It has already launched powerful things. The question is whether the whole chain can remain intact from Earth departure to Martian operation. Whether the vehicle can leave one planet and still be capable of becoming useful at another. That is a different kind of achievement. A launch is fire, a cruise is discipline, and Mars will require both. Before the robot can stand in the dust, before the fuel plant can begin its chemistry, before solar panels unfold or antennas turn toward Earth, the ship has to arrive. Quietly, accurately, still alive. It has to approach Mars not as a symbol, but as a functioning system at the end of a long test. And then the silence ends in violence. The spacecraft reaches the Martian atmosphere, and the most dangerous minutes begin. Mars has destroyed many dreams in the atmosphere. The planet looks thin from a distance. Its air is barely there compared with Earth's. The surface pressure is less than 1% of what human beings live under at sea level. But for a spacecraft arriving from interplanetary space, that thin atmosphere is still thick enough to burn, pull, shake, and punish. It is too thin to slow a heavy spacecraft easily, and too thick to ignore. That is the cruel engineering paradox of landing on Mars. There is enough atmosphere to cause danger, not enough to make landing easy. Every spacecraft that reaches Mars must pass through a sequence known as entry, descent, and landing. The phrase sounds orderly. It hides terror. First, the vehicle enters the atmosphere at high speed. Then it has to slow down. Then it has to survive heating. Then it has to navigate. Then it has to deploy or use systems that reduce velocity further. Then it has to reach the ground gently enough to remain useful. For small robotic landers and rovers, this has already been one of the hardest tasks in planetary exploration. NASA's most famous Mars landings involved heat shields, parachutes, radar, retro rockets, airbags in earlier missions, and the extraordinary sky crane maneuver used for Curiosity and Perseverance. Engineers nicknamed the final phase the 7 minutes of terror because the spacecraft had to perform the landing autonomously, while signals took too long to return to Earth for real-time control. By the time Earth knew what was happening, the landing had already happened. Or failed. That was for rovers about the size of cars. Starship is something else entirely. A Mars-bound Starship would be enormous by the standards of every payload humans have ever landed on Mars. It would not be a delicate rover protected by a traditional aeroshell and lowered from a hovering sky crane. It would be a tall, stainless steel vehicle designed to enter the atmosphere, manage enormous energy, slow itself, orient itself, and land upright. That image is so familiar from SpaceX animations that it can start to feel inevitable. It is not inevitable. Landing a skyscraper-like spacecraft on another planet is one of the most difficult ideas in modern spaceflight. The vehicle has to survive the heating of atmospheric entry. It has to control its orientation. It has to handle aerodynamic forces in a thin, variable atmosphere. It has to reignite engines after months of flight. It has to know precisely where it is. It has to choose or reach a landing zone that will not destroy it. It has to touch down without tipping, and then it has to still be useful. That last part is easy to forget. A landing that makes a beautiful video but damages the cargo, cracks a tank, compromises a seal, destroys surface equipment, or leaves the vehicle leaning at the wrong angle may count as partial success for a test, but not for settlement. Mars infrastructure cannot be built out of heroic near misses forever. The vehicle has to arrive in a condition that lets the next part of the plan happen. Cargo has to be unloaded, power has to be established, communications have to continue, robots may need to exit, fuel systems may need to deploy, the vehicle itself may need to serve as a storage depot, shelter, antenna platform, or source of parts. A starship that lands but cannot be used is not a base. It is a monument to the difficulty of arrival. The surface itself becomes part of the problem. A large vehicle landing under rocket power does not touch Mars gently in a poetic sense. It interacts with dust, rock, exhaust, pressure, and debris. Rocket plumes can excavate the surface. Dust and particles can be thrown outward. The ground beneath the engines may erode or behave unpredictably. On the Moon, plume-surface interaction is already a major concern for future landings. On Mars, the presence of a thin atmosphere changes the physics, but does not remove the danger. A landing site meant to receive repeated ships may need preparation. That means one of the first tasks on Mars may be strangely practical. Build a landing pad. Not a city. Not a dome. Not a greenhouse. A pad. A place where future ships can arrive without blasting the base apart with their own engines. A place stable enough for repeated landings. A place that reduces dust, debris, erosion, and risk to nearby equipment. A place that turns landing from a one-time miracle into something closer to procedure. Before there are roads on Mars, there may need to be a landing pad. Before there are landing pads, there may need to be machines that can make them. This is where the robot-first idea becomes more than symbolic. A humanoid robot may not be the ideal machine for building a pad. More specialized machines may be needed. Graders, compactors, sintering systems, autonomous construction units, rovers that move regolith, tools that melt or bind the surface. But whatever form they take, the logic remains the same. The first infrastructure has to prepare the planet for more infrastructure. Mars will not be settled by arrival alone. It will be settled by making the next arrival less dangerous. That is what infrastructure does. It reduces the terror of repetition. The first ship lands with high uncertainty. The next ship lands with better maps. The next with a prepared beacon. The next with a cleared zone. The next with a hardened pad. The next with equipment waiting nearby. Over time, if everything works, a landing site becomes a port. The word port is important. Ports are not romantic, they are industrial. They are places where cargo moves, where ships arrive, where repairs happen, where storage matters, where schedules become civilization. If Mars ever becomes more than a destination, its first true settlement may be less like a village and more like a port built around vehicles, propellant, cargo, and maintenance. A port without an ocean, a port where the ships fall from the sky, and at the beginning, no one may be there to greet them. Imagine the first successful cargo starship after landing. Dust settling slowly around its legs, the engines silent, the hull ticking and contracting as temperatures change, the sky a muted butterscotch haze, the horizon empty, no applause, no footsteps, no recovery crew, no cranes, no technicians driving toward it across the desert, just the ship, standing there, waiting to prove it is still alive. The first moments after landing may be as important as the landing itself. Does the vehicle transmit? Does it remain stable? Are tanks intact? Did cargo survive? Are doors operational? Can ramps deploy? Are external cameras clear? Can the onboard systems assess the surroundings? Can it orient antennas to Earth? Can it manage power? Each successful answer turns a landing into a base component. Each failed answer turns the vehicle into a puzzle no one can physically reach. And because of the communication delay, Even this first assessment is slow. Earth asks, Mars answers later. Commands are sent carefully, engineers wait. Images arrive line by line, packet by packet, showing legs, dust, horizon, shadows, hardware, maybe damage. Every photograph becomes a kind of diagnosis. This is why landing on Mars is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of exposure. The ship has survived launch, orbit, refilling, departure, cruise, and entry. Now it has to survive being on Mars, and Mars does not test everything at once. It tests over time. The first hour, the first day, the first night, the first temperature cycle, the first dust accumulation, the first software reset, the first attempt to deploy cargo, the first command that does not behave exactly as expected. The public may see the landing as the climax. For the engineers, it is the opening of a much longer uncertainty, because a city cannot be built from arrivals. It has to be built from arrivals that remain useful, and that is why the first starships to Mars, if they come, may be judged less by whether they reach the planet than by whether they are still valuable weeks, months, and years later. A ship that lands and keeps working becomes infrastructure. A ship that lands and dies becomes evidence. Both matter. Only one builds the future. The dream of Mars often begins with the image of a human footprint. The practical story may begin with a vehicle standing alone, still warm from entry, surrounded by dust, trying to open itself like a seed. And if it opens, if the cargo survives, if the systems respond, then the next strange chapter begins. The base has to wake up with no one there. The first base on Mars may begin as a checklist running in the dark. Not a room, not a settlement, not a place with voices echoing through corridors. A sequence, power on, antenna deploy, camera check, thermal control active, battery status, cargo bay pressure, ramp mechanism, external temperature, dust reading, solar angle, communications, window, fault status, retry, wait, report. This is what it means for a base to wake up alone. On Earth, almost every important machine wakes inside a human world. Someone can see it. Someone can touch it. Someone can listen when it sounds wrong. Someone can smell heat, wipe dust, tighten a bolt, press a reset button, read a local display, replace a cable, or decide that the manual does not quite fit the situation. On Mars, the first base will have no such mercy. There will be no hands, at least not human ones. If a cargo starship lands successfully, and if machines are inside it, the next challenge is activation. The difference between cargo and infrastructure is whether anything can begin to operate. A sealed box on Mars is impressive. A sealed box that opens, powers systems, communicates, and supports the next mission is the beginning of something larger. But activation on Mars is a delicate idea. Doors and ramps have to move after launch, cruise, entry, landing, dust exposure, and temperature shifts. Hinges have to work, motors have to turn, locks have to release, covers have to come off cameras and sensors, solar arrays have to unfold without snagging. Cables may need to deploy, antennas may need to orient. If a robot is inside, it has to transition from passenger to worker. Each step sounds simple because the words are simple. Open, deploy, wake, move. But each word hides a world of failure modes. A latch can jam, dust can enter a mechanism, a motor can draw too much power, a sensor can misread its environment, a ramp can stop halfway, a robot can fail to localize itself, a wheel can catch, a foot can slip, a camera can be blinded by dust, a command can arrive at the wrong time, a software system can protect itself by shutting down exactly when action is needed. On Earth, these are problems. On Mars, they become geography. A half-open door may stay half open. A robot stuck on a ramp may become an obstacle. A solar array that deploys incorrectly may cast shadows over other equipment. A container that cannot be opened may hold the very tool needed to open it. One small failure can change the entire layout of the first base. This is why early Mars infrastructure has to be designed for ugly reality, not the clean reality of animation, the dirty reality of partial success. Systems must fail gracefully. They must have alternate paths. Cargo must be accessible in more than one way if possible. Power must have redundancy. Critical tools must not all sit behind one mechanism. Robots must be able to recover from small mistakes. The base has to tolerate imperfection because Mars will almost certainly provide it. A perfect plan is fragile. A survivable plan expects damage. This is one of the places where the romance of Mars gives way to the discipline of engineering. The first base will not be judged by whether it looks futuristic. It will be judged by whether it can degrade without dying. Can it lose one panel and continue? Can one robot fail while another still works? Can communications drop and recover? Can a fuel plant pause safely? Can a heater conserve power through an unexpected low energy period? Can a system enter safe mode without becoming unreachable? Survival on Mars may depend less on brilliance than on recovery. A base that wakes alone has to be able to make decisions at the edge of certainty. It does not need consciousness, it needs robust autonomy. It needs enough local intelligence to avoid waiting for Earth for every tiny motion, because Earth is too far away. Even at best, commands take minutes, at worst, much longer. The delay means a robot cannot be joystick controlled like a toy in real time. It must be instructed, trusted, watched, corrected slowly. This changes what work means. A human operator on Earth may say, "Inspect that panel." The robot has to decide how to get there, where to step, how to avoid obstacles, when the light is good enough, whether the slope is safe, whether the task should stop because power is low, and what to do if the panel looks different than expected. Mars turns instructions into negotiations. A base waking alone also has to establish awareness. It needs to know its own shape in the environment. Where did the ship land? Is it tilted? What is nearby? Is the ground safe? Where is the sun? Is there dust on critical surfaces? Are there rocks blocking a ramp? Are antennas oriented correctly? Is the temperature within limits? What systems are healthy? Which are not? The first hours may be spent not building, but understanding. This is easy to underestimate. Human beings do this naturally. We wake in a room and immediately know where the floor is, where the door is, where the light is coming from, whether we are cold, whether something has fallen. Machines have to produce that awareness from sensors, software, maps, and design assumptions. On Mars, awareness is not philosophical, it is operational. A base that does not know its own condition cannot safely begin. So the first morning on Mars may be slow. Images sent home, engineers studying shadows, software comparing terrain, power levels assessed, dust checked, thermal conditions modelled, commands prepared cautiously, nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic in the usual sense. But beneath the quiet, the first infrastructure is crossing a threshold. It is becoming active. A cargo ship that wakes alone becomes a participant in its own future. And perhaps this is the emotional centre of the robot first plan. Human beings have always imagined the first moments on Mars as human experience, the first breath inside a suit, the first step, the first words, the first view. But in this version, the first moments belong to machines. A camera opening, a battery warming, an antenna turning, a robot booting, a panel unfolding, a signal saying, "I am here." There is something lonely in that. There is also something beautiful, because the machine is not there for itself. It is there as a bridge, a way for human intention to survive in a place where human bodies cannot yet go. A machine waking on Mars is the dream taking its smallest non-human form, not triumphant, not complete, but present. And if the base survives the first day, the next test begins, the night. Mars nights are cold. Systems have to retain enough heat. Batteries have to last. Electronics must stay within survival limits. Materials contract. Dust settles. Power disappears from solar arrays until morning. The base that seemed alive in sunlight has to prove that it can remain alive in darkness. Then comes morning. If everything wakes again, the base has done something quietly historic. It has crossed one soul, one Martian day. That may sound small, but every long future is built from such small survivals. One soul becomes 10, 10 becomes 100. 100 carries the system toward the next launch window, and each soul survived increases the value of what has landed. A dead machine is an artifact. A living machine is infrastructure. The first Mars base may therefore begin not with construction but with endurance. Before it builds anything, it has to keep itself alive. Before it moves cargo, it has to maintain power. Before it prepares for humans, it has to prove that it can exist without them. That is the strange reversal at the heart of the plan. The base must live before life arrives, and the first requirement for that kind of life is not oxygen. It is power. Before Mars can hold a human being, it has to hold a what? That may be the simplest way to understand the beginning of any settlement. Power comes before comfort, before science, before fuel, before food, before warmth, before communication, before almost everything. Without power, the base is only hardware cooling in dust. With power, it can listen, heat, move, compute, transmit, pump, compress, separate, melt, store, and wait. Electricity is the first heartbeat. On Earth, power is so ordinary that it disappears into walls. On Mars, it would become sacred. Every watt would be planned, measured, allocated, protected, and argued over. A heater draws power, a computer draws power, a pump draws power, a radio draws power, a robot walking across the surface draws power, a fuel plant draws a great deal of power, a habitat keeping its interior warm enough for future crews draws power even before anyone is inside. A city is a power problem long before it is a social one, and Mars makes power difficult in several ways at once. Solar energy is possible, but sunlight at Mars is weaker than on Earth because Mars orbits farther from the Sun. Solar panels can work and they have powered many missions, but they are vulnerable to dust. Dust in the atmosphere reduces sunlight. Dust settling on panels reduces output. Regional and global storms can darken the sky. Even without a dramatic storm, gradual dust accumulation can reduce performance over time. NASA's Mars history is filled with lessons about dust and power. Opportunity, the rover that lasted far beyond its original mission, eventually fell silent after a global dust storm in 2018 blocked sunlight long enough that it could not recover. Earlier storms had already shown how dramatically dust could reduce solar power, with severe dust blocking nearly all direct sunlight to Opportunity during one major storm. These were rovers, not cities. Small machines, carefully designed, operating with modest power needs compared with a human base. A Mars settlement would need far more. This is why power is not simply a technical subsystem, it is destiny. The kind of power source chosen determines the shape of the base. Solar arrays require area, deployment, cleaning, storage, and planning for storms. Nuclear systems offer steadier power, but bring complexity, mass, politics, safety, and engineering challenges. Batteries are not optional, because nights happen, loads fluctuate, and systems need continuity. Cables have to be placed. Power distribution has to survive dust, cold, abrasion, and perhaps the movement of machines around the site. Before humans arrive, machines may need to build the power network. That sounds simple until you imagine it clearly. A cargo ship lands. Solar arrays are inside or attached. Somehow they must reach the surface, unfold, orient, connect, and begin supplying energy. If they're too close to landing zones, dust and debris from later arrivals may damage them. If they are too far away, cables become longer and more vulnerable. If they lie flat, dust may gather. If they track the sun, the mechanisms become more complex. If cleaning is required, robots must do it. Even sunlight becomes logistics. A power system has geography. Where are the arrays? Where are the batteries? Where is the base? Where will future ships land? Where do cables cross? Can robots reach the equipment? Can a failed section be isolated? Can dust be removed? Can the system be expanded when new cargo arrives? This is how a base becomes a layout before it becomes a home. The first map of a Mars settlement may not show bedrooms or laboratories, it may show power lines. Here, the landing zone. Here, the solar field. Here, the battery storage. Here, the communications mast. Here, the fuel plant. Here, the path robots use to move between them. Here, the area that must remain clear for future landings. This is not the romantic image of Mars. It is better, in a way, because it is real. It is what the dream must become if it wants to survive contact with the planet. A settlement starts as a diagram of dependencies, energy flowing into systems, heat maintained, data transmitted, machinery preserved through nights and storms. Power also decides what robots can do. A robot without power is sculpture. A robot with limited power must choose its tasks carefully. Walking consumes energy. Heating joints consumes energy. Running sensors consumes energy. Communicating consumes energy. Waiting safely consumes energy. The machine may spend much of its life not working in the human sense, but preserving the ability to work later. This is another place where Mars rewards patience. A robot may wait through poor light. A fuel plant may pause during low power. A base may schedule heavy operations when the energy budget allows. Work becomes seasonal, daily, rhythmic. The Martian soul becomes not just a measurement of time, but a constraint on what the base can attempt. And then there are storms. A dust storm on Mars is not like the dramatic wall of sand often imagined in films, blowing people through the air. The atmosphere is too thin for that kind of force at human scale. The danger is subtler. Dust rises into the atmosphere and sunlight fades. Solar panels receive less energy. Temperatures change. Fine particles settle. A base dependent on sunlight has to endure a period when the sky itself becomes less generous. This is why oversized arrays, energy storage, backup systems, and perhaps nuclear power have all been discussed in Mars surface power studies. The issue is not whether solar power can work. It can. The issue is whether a human-class base can tolerate the worst periods Mars gives it without slipping into cascading failure. Power failures cascade. Without power, heaters weaken. Without heat, batteries suffer. Without batteries, systems cannot bridge the night. Without communications, Earth cannot assist. Without power to robots, dust cannot be cleared. Without dust clearing, solar output may decline further. A small deficit can become a spiral. The first base must be designed against spirals. It must be able to shrink its own activity without dying, to enter survival modes, to keep critical systems warm, to prioritize communications, battery health, and the machinery that allows recovery when sunlight improves. This is less exciting than building habitats, but it may matter more. A base that can survive a dust storm has passed a serious test. A base that cannot is not ready for people. Power before life also means power before fuel. The dream of making propellant on Mars depends on energy. Carbon dioxide can be pulled from the atmosphere. Water can perhaps be mined from ice. Chemistry can turn ingredients into useful propellants, but none of it happens without power. Compressors, pumps, heaters, reactors, separators, liquefaction systems, storage controls, all of them require energy. So the first fuel made on Mars begins with electricity. Before the return ship can fill, before oxygen can be produced in meaningful quantities, before methane can be stored, before a human crew can believe that leaving is possible, some power system has to keep operating. This makes the first power station on Mars almost sacred in the architecture of the plan. It is not just equipment, it is the first condition for everything that follows. A solar field or nuclear unit humming in the dust is the difference between a site and a system. If it works, Mars becomes slightly less dead. Not alive, not welcoming, just responsive. A command is sent, a machine moves, a panel turns, a heater warms, a transmitter speaks, a pump begins. These small responses are the first signs that the planet can host more than wreckage. And perhaps, years before a human arrives, the first true Martian settlement will be visible only in electrical terms. A pattern of power generation and consumption on a planet that has never known cities. Energy gathered, stored, and used by machines that are waiting for biology to follow. The first lights on Mars may not shine through windows. They may glow inside equipment boxes. They may be status indicators, heater circuits, battery monitors, transmitter signals, the silent electrical pulse of a base with no people. And once power exists, the plan can attempt its most important transformation. It can try to make Mars provide something in return, not shelter, not food, not comfort, fuel. The most important factory on Mars may not make anything humans can see. It may make a way home. That is the strange truth at the center of the SpaceX Mars architecture. Getting to Mars is only half of the problem, and perhaps not even the harder half in the long run. A mission that sends humans to the surface but cannot bring them back is not a normal exploration mission. It is a permanent migration, or a tragedy delayed by polite language. A credible Mars system needs return fuel, and return fuel is heavy. Very heavy. If all the propellant needed for the return journey has to be carried from Earth, the mass penalty becomes enormous. Every kilogram launched from Earth must first fight Earth's gravity. Every extra kilogram of return propellant makes the departure vehicle heavier, the mission more expensive, the architecture more difficult. This is why Mars planners have long been interested in in situ resource utilization. often shortened to ISRU, which simply means using resources found at the destination rather than bringing everything from home. On Mars, the obvious resource is not abundance in the earthly sense. It is carbon dioxide. The Martian atmosphere is thin, but it is mostly carbon dioxide. Water exists as ice, especially in polar regions and in subsurface deposits. If a system can gather carbon dioxide from the air and obtain hydrogen from water, then chemistry opens a door. Through processes such as the Sabatier reaction, carbon dioxide and hydrogen can be converted into methane and water. Oxygen can be produced from water or directly from carbon dioxide through other processes. Methane and oxygen are the propellants Starship is designed to use. This is the elegant version of the plan. Land on Mars, use Martian air and water, make methane and oxygen, refuel the ship, come home. It is beautiful because it turns Mars from a passive destination into a participant. The planet becomes part of the transportation system. The atmosphere becomes feedstock. The ice becomes hydrogen. The surface becomes not just a place to land, but a place that contributes to leaving. But elegance on paper is not the same as machinery and dust. A Mars fuel plant would be one of the most important and unforgiving machines ever built. It would have to land safely, deploy correctly, draw power, intake Martian atmosphere, compress it, process it, acquire or receive hydrogen, manage water, run chemical reactions, separate products, liquefy gases, store cryogenic methane and oxygen, keep those cryogenic fluids cold, prevent leaks, monitor purity, handle dust, survive thermal cycles, operate with minimal human intervention, and do all of this at a scale large enough to matter for a return vehicle. That phrase matters. At a scale large enough to matter. NASA's MOXIE experiment on the Perseverance rover was a historic demonstration because it produced oxygen from the carbon dioxide in the Martian atmosphere. It proved, in a small but real way, that a machine on Mars could make oxygen from Mars itself. MOXIE eventually generated a total of 122 grams of oxygen over its mission, and at its most efficient it produced 12 grams per hour at high purity. That is remarkable as a technology demonstration. It is also tiny compared with a human mission. That contrast is the point. The first oxygen made on Mars was not fuel for a human return ship. It was proof that the door exists. A future system would have to walk through that door at industrial scale. Not grams, tons. Not a demonstration tucked inside a rover. A plant large enough, reliable enough, and power-hungry enough to fill the tanks of a spacecraft. This is where the dream becomes a factory. And the factory has to work before the people trust it. Imagine an empty Mars base years before the first crew. A Starship stands nearby. A power field supplies energy. A fuel plant draws in thin air. Somewhere, ice has been found, extracted or processed, or hydrogen has been supplied in another way as part of an early architecture. Pipes run between tanks. Compressors cycle. Reactors heat. Sensors monitor. The plant produces methane and oxygen slowly, far more slowly than the public imagination wants, and stores them in tanks that must remain stable through cold, heat, dust, and time. There are no workers in the ordinary sense, only machines tending machines. This is perhaps the most important threshold in the entire Mars plan. The moment Mars begins to make the return possible. Until then, everything is still Earth reaching outward. Every kilogram has come from home. Every system is an extension of Earth's industry. But when Mars-made propellant begins to accumulate, even in small amounts, the relationship changes. Mars gives something back. Not life, not welcome, but leverage. A spacecraft refueled partly or fully from Martian resources is no longer just a visitor. It has used the planet as part of its own mission. That is the difference between exploration and infrastructure. Exploration carries what it needs. Infrastructure learns how to draw from the place itself. This is why fuel matters more than almost anything else in the early base. A habitat keeps people alive. A fuel plant keeps the mission from becoming one way. It is hard to overstate the psychological importance of that. A crew landing near a verified, functioning, sufficiently filled return system is in a different universe from a crew landing with the hope that fuel production will work later. The first version is dangerous. The second borders on unacceptable, unless the mission is explicitly one way. For a serious human mission, return fuel is not a convenience, it is moral architecture. It is the difference between asking people to explore and asking them to gamble their lives on a machine that has not yet proven itself. That is why the machines must go first. The fuel plant has to fail before humans depend on it. If it is going to fail, it has to reveal its weaknesses early. Maybe dust clogs intakes, maybe compressors underperform, maybe power demands are higher than expected, maybe storage losses are worse, maybe valves stick, maybe thermal management is harder, maybe the ice is not where expected, or extracting it requires equipment more massive than planned. Each of these failures is painful when no humans are there. Each becomes horrifying if discovered after the crew has landed. Mars should teach the machines first, then the humans can decide whether the lesson was kind enough. There is also an emotional strangeness to a fuel plant on Mars. It is a machine-making departure before arrival, a system whose entire purpose is to prepare for people leaving a place they have not yet reached. It is, in a sense, a promise being manufactured in advance. A tank slowly filling on Mars would be one of the most consequential images in human exploration. Not beautiful in the ordinary sense. No sweeping valley, no astronaut silhouette, no flag. Just numbers rising, pressure, temperature, mass, purity, storage levels, methane, oxygen, a return path becoming real 1 kilogram at a time. That is the kind of victory Mars will require. Dust is one of the quietest enemies on Mars. It does not look like much from far away. A reddish film over rocks, a haze in the sky, a soft layer on solar panels, a colour, almost, more than a substance. In photographs, it can seem gentle, powdery, fine, the kind of dust you imagine brushing away with one patient hand. But Martian dust is not gentle. It is old, sharp, persistent, chemically difficult, and everywhere. For a machine trying to survive on Mars, dust is not background. It is a system-level threat. It settles on panels, it coats lenses, it creeps towards seals, it clings to surfaces, it changes thermal behavior, it can reduce power, it can interfere with joints, hinges, bearings, connectors, radiators, cameras, filters, wheels, and anything that depends on clean contact between one part and another. And unlike a storm on Earth, where rain may eventually wash surfaces clean, Mars offers no easy reset. There is no rain. There are winds, yes. There are dust devils. There are seasonal changes, storms, local gusts, and sometimes planet-encircling dust events that turn the sky opaque. But the dust itself remains part of the environment. It does not go away because human plans require clarity. It waits on every surface. The Apollo astronauts learned a version of this problem on the Moon. Lunar dust was abrasive, clingy, sharp-edged, and deeply irritating. It stuck to suits, scratched visors, entered the lunar module, and smelled strange when it was brought inside. Some astronauts worried about how much worse it might become on longer missions. Apollo only stayed for days. A lunar base would have to deal with dust for months or years. Mars may be more forgiving in some ways and more complicated in others. The dust is weathered differently. The atmosphere changes how particles move. The chemistry is different. But for machines, the core truth remains the same. Fine planetary dust is not just dirt. It is wear. It is contamination. It is loss of efficiency spread grain by grain. A Mars base built before humans arrive would have to face dust without human maintenance. That is the part that matters. On Earth, if dust covers a solar panel, someone can clean it. If a filter clogs, someone can replace it. If grit gets into a joint, someone can inspect it. If a lens is obscured, someone can wipe it. Human hands are the hidden repair system behind almost every machine we build. Even autonomous systems on Earth are usually autonomous inside a world full of rescue. Mars removes the rescue. A robot sent to clean a solar panel may itself become dusty, a brush may wear, a joint may jam, a camera may become clouded, a wheel may dig into soft material. A cleaning system may work for one season and fail in the next. The machinery designed to fight dust becomes part of the dust problem. This is where the dream of a robot workforce becomes less smooth and more believable. The first robots on Mars may spend much of their time not building, but maintaining. That is not a failure of imagination. It is the beginning of realism. Before a robot can construct a base, it may need to keep the base from slowly disappearing under the environment. Before it assembles grand structures, It may need to brush panels, inspect seals, check intakes, clear sensors, and report where dust is accumulating faster than predicted. Maintenance is not the opposite of exploration. On Mars, maintenance may be the first true exploration, because to maintain something is to learn what the planet is doing to it. A solar panel losing output tells a story. A hinge wearing too quickly tells a story. A filter clogging tells a story. Dust accumulating on one side of a vehicle more than another tells a story about wind, terrain, static charge, and orientation. A robot that keeps failing in the same type of soil tells engineers something the orbital images did not. Mars will teach through damage. That is why the first machines have to be treated as scouts in the deepest sense. Not only scouts for landscapes, but scouts for failure modes. They will discover which assumptions were too clean, which mechanisms were too delicate, which materials performed well, which designs looked good on Earth but aged badly in Martian reality. Dust also changes power, and power changes everything. A base dependent on solar energy is always in conversation with the sky. Clear sky means work. Dusty sky means caution. Dust on panels means lower output. Lower output means fewer operations. Fewer operations may mean less cleaning, less movement, less heating margin, less fuel production, less communication time, and more time spent in survival modes. A settlement can die slowly from arithmetic. Not from one catastrophe, but from energy budgets that never quite recover. A storm reduces power, systems shut down, batteries drain deeper, heaters run less, cold stresses components, dust remains, panels produce less the next day. The base survives, but weaker. Then another storm comes, another fault, another reduced margin. This is the kind of failure that does not make a dramatic thumbnail. It is also exactly the kind of failure a real Mars base has to resist. The first base has to be designed not only to perform tasks, but to avoid downward spirals. It needs reserves, it needs redundancy, it needs cleaning strategies, it needs ways to prioritize critical systems, it needs to know when to stop working and simply stay alive. It needs enough intelligence to recognize that surviving the dust storm matters more than completing the planned task. On Mars, ambition has to know when to sleep, and dust may not only affect machines. Eventually it affects humans too. If people arrive, dust becomes a habitat problem, a suit problem, a health problem, an airlock problem. Dust carried inside living spaces could threaten lungs, filters, electronics, and equipment. Martian dust is also associated with chemically reactive compounds, including perchlorates in the soil, which complicate the idea of treating the surface as simple dirt. Any serious human base would need strict dust control systems, suit ports, cleaning procedures, filtration, and ways of preventing the outside world from slowly entering the inside one. But before human health is at risk, machine health is at risk, and that is the important sequence. Let the machines learn the dust first. Let them stand through storms. Let them lose power. Let them jam, recover, clean, fail, survive, report. Let them show which designs are fantasy and which ones can actually endure. Let Mars do to metal what it might one day do to habitats and suits before there are people inside them. This is not pessimism, it is respect. A planet deserves to be tested before it is trusted. The first Martian dust on a robot's foot may look like a poetic image, but to the engineers, it will be more than poetry. It will be contact. The beginning of the argument between human machinery and a world that has never had to accommodate human intention. The dust will enter that argument immediately. It will settle over the first landing legs. It will lie on the first solar arrays. It will cling to the first robot cameras. It will gather in corners of equipment bays. It will record the direction of wind against the sides of landed ships. It will cover tracks, soften edges, and slowly turn clean hardware into part of the landscape. A base on Mars will have to resist becoming landscape. That may be one of the most difficult things of all, because Mars is patient. It has time to cover everything, time to cool everything, time to wait through every launch window, time to let machines reveal their weaknesses, time to remind every engineer on Earth that a plan drawn in a clean room eventually has to live in dust. And if the machines can survive that, then the next stage begins. Not a city yet, not even close. First, there has to be storage, inventory, spare parts, tools, containers, the dull, necessary weight of civilization arriving before civilization itself. because Mars will not become a home when the first person lands. It will become a home only if enough of Earth has already been shipped there in pieces. Before there is a city on Mars, there will be a warehouse, not a beautiful one, not a warm one. Not a warehouse with lights humming over concrete floors and workers moving between shelves. A Martian warehouse may begin as a landed spacecraft, a buried cargo container, a sealed pressure vessel, or a collection of boxes arranged by robots in a place where no human being has ever stood. But functionally, that is what it will be. Storage. Civilization begins with storage because survival depends on things being available before they are needed. Food before hunger, filters before contamination, seals before leaks, tools before breakage, medicine before injury, batteries before darkness, spare parts before failure, fuel before departure, water before thirst, cable before connection, replacement hardware before the original hardware stops working. On Earth, storage is so ordinary that it feels almost invisible. Every city is surrounded by it. Warehouses, depots, supermarkets, ports, data centers, fuel tanks, pharmacies, distribution centers, repair shops, maintenance yards, shipping containers, trucks, shelves. A city is not only buildings where people live, it is the hidden accumulation that allows life to continue when something is consumed, damaged, delayed, or lost. Mars would make that hidden accumulation visible. At first, the base may be mostly storage. A cargo ship on the surface, containers inside it, containers outside it, tanks arranged in the cold, spare equipment waiting in sealed packaging, rovers parked near ramps, tools catalogued by machines, emergency supplies nobody has touched, replacement parts for systems not yet operating, food for people not yet launched, habitat components waiting for assembly, power cables coiled like sleeping snakes. This is not the image people usually associate with becoming multiplanetary, but it is probably closer to the truth. SpaceX's own Mars vision speaks in city-scale terms, upwards of 1 million people and millions of tons of cargo if the goal is a self-sufficient city. That kind of number is so large that it almost stops being meaningful. Millions of tons. A scale far beyond flags and footprints. A scale that belongs to ports, fleets, factories, storage yards, and repetitive transport across decades. A million-person city on Mars is not one dream. It is millions of shipments, and each shipment has to be useful after landing. That is the challenge. Mass alone is not enough. 1 million tons of the wrong things is not a city. Cargo has to arrive in the right sequence. Too many habitat panels and not enough power, and the base cannot operate. Too much scientific equipment and not enough spare parts, and the first failures become permanent. Too many robots and not enough charging capacity, and the workers sleep forever. Too much food without enough storage protection, and supplies degrade. Too much ambition without enough maintenance, and the entire site becomes a museum of unfinished intentions. Mars will require choreography in cargo form. What comes first? Power. Communications, landing aids, mobility, storage, basic maintenance, environmental sensing, dust mitigation, fuel production tests, construction tools, shelter systems, more power, more storage, more redundancy. Only later, perhaps, the systems that begin to resemble human life. The order matters because the base is not simply a pile of equipment, it is a dependency network. One system enables another. Power enables communications. Communications enable remote operation. Remote operation enables deployment. Deployment enables fuel production. Fuel production enables return confidence. Return confidence enables human arrival. Human arrival enables more complex construction. Complex construction enables longer stays. Longer stays enable something like settlement. If the order is wrong, the dream collapses into stranded hardware. A cargo-first Mars plan is therefore a question of inventory intelligence. Not only what can be sent, but when. Not only what is impressive, but what is needed. Not only what would look good in a launch announcement, but what will matter during the third Martian winter when one pump fails, and the only replacement is inside a container that a robot cannot open. That is the kind of detail that decides whether a base is real. Can the right spare part be reached? Can the machine identify it? Can it be moved? Can it be installed? Can the system verify the repair? Can Earth help with a delay of minutes each way? Can the base survive long enough for the repair to be done slowly? Every one of these questions is a storage question, a robotics question, and a design question at once. The The first Martian warehouse may need to be legible to machines, labels designed for cameras, shapes designed for robotic graspers, containers designed to open with limited dexterity, parts arranged not for human convenience, but for autonomous access, tools stored where a robot can reach them, interfaces standardized, handles designed for machines, not hands, error states anticipated, everything boring, everything deliberate. This is what it means to build a city before people arrive. You have to make the city understandable to non-human workers. A normal city is built around human bodies: door handles, stairs, shelves, signs, corridors, light switches, kitchens, chairs, ladders, desks, tools. The built world assumes hands, eyes, height, balance, judgment, and social behavior. A pre-human Mars base cannot assume that. It may have to be built around robots first, then humans later. That reversal is subtle, but enormous. The first Martian architecture may be robotic architecture. Wide paths for machines, simple connectors, high-contrast markers, dust-tolerant access points, modular containers, mechanical interfaces that do not require delicate fingers, standardized ports, visual fiducials, redundant latches, external storage designed for cold, internal storage designed for pressure, everything shaped by the fact that the first workers may not breathe. And this is where the idea of a city begins to change. A city is usually imagined as a place for people. But the first city on Mars may begin as a place for systems. Systems that store, monitor, preserve, distribute, and protect the conditions of future life. In that sense, the first Martian city will not be socially alive. It will be operationally alive. It will have flows, priorities, dependencies, vulnerabilities, and memory. It will know what has arrived. It will know what has failed. It will know which tank is full, which panel is dusty, which battery is weak, which container holds the replacement valve. Inventory becomes memory. A base that cannot remember what it has is not a base. It is a pile. This is another reason machines may have to go first. They do not only build, they count, they inspect, they map, they update the state of the site, they tell Earth what is still usable, they turn landed cargo into known cargo. Known cargo is valuable. Unknown cargo is only hope. Imagine a Starship landing with 20 tons of useful supplies, but after landing, no one knows which containers shifted, which seals failed, which systems are reachable, which items are damaged, or where the most critical tools ended up. That cargo exists physically, but not operationally. It is there, but not yet part of the base. A robot that can inspect it turns it into infrastructure. It opens the story from mass to usefulness. And this is why the early Mars base may spend years doing things that look nothing like colonization to the public. Inventory checks, deployment tests, dust measurements, cable routing, power monitoring, storage verification, container inspections, small movements repeated carefully, a slow conversion of delivered mass into usable capacity. The first Martian economy may be an economy of keeping track. What survived? What works? What can be used next? What must be replaced in the next window? What can be left alone? What is failing slowly? What is safe enough for humans? These questions are not glamorous, but they are the foundation of every real human place. Before there is culture, there is continuity. Before there is continuity, there is storage. And before storage becomes useful, something has to tend it. That may be the first real work of the machines, not building a shining city, not raising domes under a red sky, simply making sure that the first pieces of the city are still there, still known, still reachable, still alive in the operational sense. The first Mars base may look empty from the outside, but inside its containers, if the plan works, there will be future time. Meals not yet eaten, tools not yet held, air not yet breathed, parts not yet needed, fuel not yet burned, a place for humans waiting before humans are ready. And once enough of that waiting material exists, the hardest question becomes unavoidable. When can people safely follow? Quiet numbers. A fuel plant reaching a target, a tank holding, a leak not appearing, a system restarting after a cold night, a machine proving that the planet can be used without being inhabited yet. And if that happens, the meaning of the first human landing changes. The astronauts are no longer stepping into a pure unknown. They are stepping into a site where the machinery of return has already begun. They are still in danger, they are still far from home, but they are not arriving empty-handed into emptiness. They are arriving at the first industrial foothold. This may be the most honest way to imagine Mars, not as a second Earth, not as a blank canvas, not as a destiny waiting to unfold, but as a place where survival has to be manufactured. Air has to be manufactured, warmth has to be manufactured, pressure has to be manufactured, water has to be managed, power has to be generated, fuel has to be produced, safety has to be assembled from parts. Mars is not the opposite of technology. Mars is where technology becomes the environment. The first Martians may not be human because the first Martian act is not breathing, walking, or speaking. It is production, making power, making oxygen, making fuel, making continuity, making the possibility that the people who arrive do not have to stay forever because the machinery failed them. And once fuel begins to exist, the base becomes more than a camp. It becomes a node in a transport system, a place where ships might land, refill, and leave, a place connected not only by radio, but by recurring movement between planets. That is the true beginning of a route. But fuel is not the only thing Mars will test. Every machine that tries to make that fuel, every panel that powers it, every robot that tends it, and every seal that protects it will face the same quiet enemy. Dust. Fine, persistent, electrostatic, abrasive dust. The kind that does not need to destroy the dream all at once, only grain by grain. A human landing on Mars will be one of the most watched moments in history if it happens. But by the time the first astronaut steps onto the surface, the most important decision may already have been made years earlier. Not the decision to launch, the decision that enough was waiting. That is the real human arrival problem. It is not simply whether a spacecraft can carry people across interplanetary space. It is whether the planet they arrive at has already been prepared enough to justify risking human life there. The first crew cannot be treated like the first cargo. They cannot be allowed to fail usefully. They cannot become data in the same way a robot can. A crewed Mars landing must arrive inside a margin built by machines, power working, communications verified, landing site mapped, weather understood as well as possible, surface hazards known, emergency supplies placed, shelter ready or rapidly deployable, radiation protection available, dust control procedures tested, return architecture credible, medical systems prepared, fuel production either already proven or the mission designed around another honest return strategy. This is where the dream narrows, because sending humans is not only harder than sending machines, it is morally different. A machine mission can accept a level of risk that no crewed mission should carry. A cargo starship can test landing reliability by landing. If it fails, the next one improves. A robot can test surface mobility by attempting tasks. If it fails, engineers learn. A fuel plant can test chemistry. If it underperforms, the next design changes. But the first human crew cannot be sent into a plan that still depends on major unknowns behaving kindly. They can accept danger. Astronauts always have. But danger is not the same as avoidable ignorance. That distinction matters. Exploration has never meant eliminating risk. It means understanding risk deeply enough that courage is not being used to cover negligence. A Mars crew will know they are entering one of the most hostile environments humans have ever tried to inhabit. They will accept isolation, radiation, delay, confinement, uncertainty, and the possibility of death. But the systems around them must already have earned trust. Trust, on Mars, is built by uncrewed missions. This is why the first machines carry more than cargo. They carry ethical weight. Every successful landing makes the human mission less blind. Every failed component teaches before lives depend on it. Every dust-covered panel, every power curve, every frozen joint, every communications outage, every fuel production test becomes part of the case for or against sending people. The planet should be interrogated by machines before it is entered by bodies. And yet, eventually, if the plan continues, someone has to decide that the evidence is enough. That decision will be enormous. It will not be purely technical. It will be political, emotional, financial, cultural, and deeply human. There will be pressure to go. Pressure from history, pressure from national competition, pressure from investors, fans, governments, critics, employees, and the sheer momentum of a program built for a purpose. There will also be pressure not to go. From failed tests, cost overruns, safety reviews, medical concerns, radiation models, landing risks, and the memory of every spaceflight disaster that began with confidence. Somewhere between those pressures, the first crewed Mars mission will either become real or remain postponed. And if it becomes real, the crew will not simply be travellers. They will be the first biological extension of a machine-built place. Think of what they will need to see when they arrive. Not perfection. Perfection will not exist, but enough. Enough power generation that the base is not living hour to hour. Enough shelter that the crew is not wholly dependent on a single fragile vehicle. Enough communications that silence does not become normal. Enough supplies that one damaged container does not become existential. Enough mobility that they can move between landed assets. Enough dust control that the outside does not steadily poison the inside. Enough return capability that the mission is not secretly one way. Enough is a very difficult word. It is the word mission planners will argue over. How much return fuel is enough? How many redundant systems? How many cargo ships must land successfully first? How close together must they be? How much power reserve? How much medical capability? How much autonomy? How much radiation shelter? How much food margin? How much repairability? Too little, and the mission becomes reckless. Too much, and it may never launch. Mars lives in that tension. A first crew arriving after machines would step into a strange inheritance. They would not be the first human-made presence there. They would be joining something already in progress. The site may have years of machine history before it has a single human memory. Tracks made by robots, dust disturbed by cargo ramps, landing scars from earlier starships, solar fields already aged by storms, tanks partly filled, antennas already aligned with Earth, equipment already repaired, failed, or abandoned. The astronauts would arrive as the first people in a place that is not untouched. That may feel less romantic than the first footprint myth. It may also be wiser. Human beings are not diminished by arriving after machines. They are protected by them. The machines become the first layer of courage. The scouts, the workers, the silent builders, the ones that take the planet's first punishment. But even with preparation, the first crew will face something no machine can test fully: human presence. Humans bring needs. Machines do not have air quality, hygiene, sleep, fear, conflict, injury, private grief, motivation, boredom, or homesickness. The psychology of looking up and knowing that Earth is not a place you can return to quickly. The weight of being watched by billions and unreachable by everyone. A robot can fail alone. A human can feel alone. That difference changes everything. The first Mars crew would inhabit a base built partly by machines, but they would also transform it. A storage site becomes a workplace. A pressure vessel becomes a room. A communications delay becomes a family problem. A power shortage becomes a human stressor. A dust storm becomes not only an engineering event, but an emotional one. A returned fuel reading becomes something people check with their whole future attached to it. The base becomes human when its failures can frighten someone. Before that, it is infrastructure. After that, it is life support. This is why the transition from machine base to human base may be one of the most delicate phases in the entire plan. The systems must change category. They are no longer proving themselves abstractly. They are holding people. Every sound inside the habitat, every alarm, every pressure fluctuation, every battery warning, every delay in a message from Earth acquires human meaning. The first crew will also need to work, not pose, work. They will inspect everything the machines prepared, repair what robots could not, move cargo, connect systems, clear dust, check tanks, deploy new equipment, improve the site, expand power, prepare future arrivals, and perhaps most importantly, they will judge whether Mars is giving back enough to continue. Because a first crew is not a colony. A first crew is a test of whether the machine-built foothold can become a human place. That test may succeed modestly, not dramatically. A crew survives, works, repairs, produces fuel, sleeps badly, misses home, solves problems, sends back images, comes home. The base remains. The next crew improves it. That is one possible future. Another future is harsher. The crew arrives and discovers that every margin was thinner than expected. Dust is worse. Power is tighter. Repairs take longer. Fuel production lags. human stress rises. Return windows begin to feel less like scheduling and more like fate. The base works, but only barely. The dream continues, but slower, and there is always the darker possibility that the machines were not enough, that the site was not ready. That confidence outran reality. This is the shadow behind every Mars plan, and it should not be hidden. Not exaggerated, not used cheaply, but acknowledged. The first human arrival on Mars will be inspiring only if it is also honest about what inspiration costs. The machines go first to make that cost bearable. They do not remove danger. They convert unknown danger into known danger, and known danger is the only kind humans have any right to walk toward. So when people imagine the first Martian stepping onto the surface, maybe the image should widen. Not just the astronaut, not just the red dust, not just the flag or the camera or the line that will be quoted forever. Behind that moment, imagine the machines, the cargo ships that came first, the failed landers, the working antennas, the dust-covered panels, the tanks that filled slowly, the robot that fell and taught the next robot how not to, the empty base that waited, the power systems that kept breathing electricity into a place with no breath. That is what the first human footstep would stand on. Not just Mars, preparation. And if that preparation is not strong enough, the story turns toward the possibility every engineer, planner, and dreamer has to face. What happens if the machines fail? There is a version of the Mars dream that ends before the first human arrives. Not with an explosion watched live by millions, not with a dramatic emergency, not with a final message from a crew trapped beneath another sky. A quieter ending. A machine that stops responding. A solar array that never fully deploys. A fuel plant that cannot restart after a cold night. A robot that falls and cannot rise. A cargo ship that lands too hard, tips slightly, and becomes unreachable in the ways that matter. The dream does not always die loudly. Sometimes it becomes silent hardware. This is the graveyard scenario. A starship stands on Mars, but its cargo door will not open. Another landed 20 kilometers away from the planned site, intact but isolated. A robot powered on for 3 sols, moved carefully down a ramp, then froze after dust entered a joint. A solar field deployed halfway and never reached full output. A communications mast worked for a month, then began failing intermittently. A fuel plant produced a small test amount of methane, then shut down after contamination in a valve. The site remains visible from orbit. Human-made, historic, useless. Not completely useless, perhaps. Nothing that reaches Mars is completely useless if it teaches, but useless as a base. That distinction is painful. A failed Mars base could still be a scientific and engineering treasure. Images, telemetry, failure data, thermal readings, dust behavior, landing performance, material aging, software anomalies, all of it could improve the next attempt. But to the public imagination, and to any timeline promising human arrival, the site would be something else. A warning. A place where the future arrived too early. This is why failure on Mars has a strange permanence. On Earth, failed construction sites are cleared, rebuilt, repurposed, hidden, demolished, paved over. Weather softens them, vegetation returns, people salvage materials, the landscape absorbs the evidence, Mars preserves. A broken spacecraft may remain visible for decades. A robot track may last far longer than it would on Earth. A half-built base may sit under dust and cold, not erased, not reclaimed, simply paused forever. The planet has no rain to wash away the embarrassment, no plants to grow over the mistake, no local workers to salvage the parts. Failure becomes archaeology before civilization even begins. That is a haunting possibility. The first human-made settlement attempt on Mars may become a ruin without ever having been inhabited, a city that never became a city. This should not make the plan feel impossible. It should make it feel serious. Any project at this scale must include failure. Spaceflight advances by testing, breaking, rebuilding, and trying again. Rockets fail, landers fail, robots fail, software fails, timelines fail. Every mature aerospace system is built on lessons paid for by hardware that did not survive. But Mars changes the cost of iteration. A failed test on Earth can be inspected physically. Engineers can walk to the wreckage, cut into tanks, recover sensors, examine fractures, smell burned insulation, retrieve components, and understand in detail. A failed test on Mars may be partly unknowable. It can send data until it cannot. It can photograph itself if the cameras work. It can be observed from orbit, but no one can walk over and look closely, at least not for years, and perhaps not ever. Mars failure is remote failure. It leaves questions behind. Why did the joint seize? Why did the panel stop moving? Was it dust, temperature, torque, software, material stress, or a combination? Why did output decline faster than expected? Was the sensor wrong or the system? Why did the robot stop after that last image? Did it fall? Did it lose power? Did it enter safe mode? Is it recoverable? Is it waiting for a command we do not know how to send? The silence becomes an engineering document with missing pages. This is one reason the first machines have to be numerous and redundant. One robot is a symbol. Many robots are a strategy. One cargo ship is a test. Many cargo ships are the beginning of a supply chain. One power source is a vulnerability. Multiple power sources become resilience. The Mars plan cannot depend on perfection because Mars will not provide it. The first base must be allowed to lose pieces. A system that fails completely when one component dies is not ready. A system that degrades, reroutes, waits, switches modes, uses backups and continues at reduced capacity is more realistic. The goal is not to prevent every failure. The goal is to prevent failures from joining hands, because cascading failure is the real enemy. Dust reduces power. Lower power reduces heating. Reduced heating damages batteries. Weaker batteries limit robot operations. Robots cannot clean panels. Panels produce less. Communications are reduced. Earth cannot diagnose quickly. A fuel plant pauses. Cryogenic storage warms. A valve sticks. The system enters safe mode. Safe mode preserves life for a while, but also stops the work needed to recover. That is how a base dies without a single dramatic moment. Slowly, logically, one dependency at a time. The graveyard scenario is powerful because it is not fantasy. It is simply the negative version of the supply chain. Every system that makes a base possible also creates a way for the base to fail. Power, communications, robotics, fuel, storage, dust control, landing accuracy, autonomy. Each one is a promise and a vulnerability. And yet, there is another way to see it. A silent starship on Mars would still mean someone reached Mars with a vehicle of extraordinary scale. A failed robot would still mean a humanoid machine crossed interplanetary space. A broken fuel plant would still mean the first attempt at another planet's industrial chemistry had begun. A half-deployed base would still be further than almost any civilization in history has ever reached. Failure at that distance is still a form of arrival, but it is not settlement, and the difference matters. This is where the video's central question sharpens. The first Martians may not be human, but if the first machines fail, then humans may never follow, or they may follow much later, after the dream has been slowed by the planet itself. The robots are not side characters. They are the first negotiation with Mars. Their success or failure decides whether the next chapter can be biological. A failed machine says, not yet. A surviving machine says, perhaps. That may be the most honest emotional language of Mars. Not yes, not no. Perhaps. Perhaps the next window can send more. Perhaps the landing can be improved. Perhaps the dust can be managed. Perhaps fuel production can scale. Perhaps robots can do enough. Perhaps the first crew can arrive to a site that has earned trust. Mars settlement will likely be built out of many perhapses, each one tested by hardware. This is why the graveyard image matters. It gives the dream weight. Without the possibility of failure, the story becomes advertisement. With failure included, the story becomes human, even before humans arrive. Because all real exploration carries the risk of becoming wreckage. The question is whether the wreckage teaches enough. Imagine, decades from now, astronauts finally walking across a Martian plain. Not the first machines, not the first landing site, but a later crew sent after years of attempts. They come upon an old robot half covered in dust, a machine from the early window, maybe one of the first. It failed long before they arrived. Its cameras are blind, its joints are frozen, its body is tilted slightly, as if it was still trying to continue. To the mission, it is obsolete hardware. To history, it is something else, a precursor, a thing that went first so people did not have to. That is the softer truth inside even the graveyard scenario. The machines may fail, but their failure can still be part of the route. They can absorb danger, they can expose illusions, they can turn Mars from myth into a set of known problems, they can make the next machine better, they can make the first crew safer by not being safe themselves. Maybe that is what going first means, not succeeding perfectly, but meeting the planet before the humans do. Still, the dream cannot remain, forever in failure and preparation. At some point, the question becomes larger than any one robot, one starship, one fuel plant, or one launch window. What is the first city on Mars, really? Is it a settlement when people arrive? Or does it begin earlier, when machines create continuity in a place where no life exists? That is where the story has to land. Not with the robot alone, not with the rocket alone, but with the strange possibility of a city that begins before its citizens. The first city on Mars may spend years standing empty. No children, no markets, no kitchens, no footsteps in corridors, no ordinary human mess. No one waking in the middle of the night to look out through a small window at a red horizon. No one arguing over tools, no one laughing in a habitat after a long day, no one planting anything green beneath artificial light. Only systems, a power field, a communications mast, a landed starship, a fuel plant, a storage yard, a robot path, a pressure vessel, a battery bank, a dust-covered camera, a tank slowly filling, a container waiting to be opened, a base that is not yet lived in, but is no longer nothing. This may be the strangest idea in the entire Mars plan. A city can begin before people, not socially, not culturally, not emotionally, but operationally, as a collection of systems that make future human presence possible. A place designed around arrival, survival, return and repetition. A site where machines hold open the possibility that biology may one day follow. On Earth, cities usually begin with people. Humans gather, shelter, trade, farm, defend, worship, build, govern, remember. The city grows from human need. Infrastructure follows, expands, hardens, becomes invisible over time. Mars reverses the order. Infrastructure has to come first because human need cannot survive unprotected. The base must precede the settlement. The storage must precede the household. The fuel must precede the journey home. The power must precede the light. The machine must precede the hand. This reversal makes Mars less romantic but more profound. Because if it happens, it means human civilization has learned to project not only exploration, but preparation across planets. It means we can send the first rough skeleton of a living place before life arrives. It means a city can begin as intention, encoded into machines, delivered through launch windows, tested by dust and cold, and kept alive by electricity. A city without people sounds like a contradiction. On Mars it may be a requirement, but there is a danger in using the word city too early. A few landed ships are not a city. A power system is not a city. A robot is not a city. A fuel plant is not a city. Even a human crew living on Mars for a short time may not be a city. A city implies continuity, growth, replacement, memory, and the ability to survive beyond a single mission. So perhaps the first city does not begin when the first hardware lands. Perhaps it begins when the hardware can receive the next hardware, when one window builds on the last, when the site becomes easier to return to than to abandon, when machines from the first wave support machines from the second, when power generated one year helps fuel production the next, when stored cargo becomes useful to a later crew, when the base remembers itself across time. Continuity is the seed of the city, not population, not architecture, continuity. This is why the phrase, "the first Martians may not be human," matters. It is not really about replacing human explorers with robots. It is about understanding that, on Mars, personhood cannot be the first layer. The first layer has to be persistence. Something must remain, something must work, something must wait. The first Martian, in the practical sense, may be the first system that survives long enough to matter. A robot that wakes after winter, a power station that keeps producing, a fuel plant that fills a tank, a cargo ship that becomes storage, a base that makes the next arrival safer. These things do not dream. They do not look up and feel wonder. They do not miss Earth. They do not care about history, but they can carry human intention forward. They can hold a place for us in an environment that would otherwise erase our plans, and that may be enough for the first chapter. There is a humility in this version of Mars that is easy to overlook. The dream of stepping onto another planet places humans at the center. The Machine First version does the opposite. It admits that the planet is too hard for our bodies at first. It admits that courage must be preceded by preparation. It admits that intelligence sometimes means not going yet. Send the tools, send the shelter, send the power, send the fuel plant, send the robot. Let the planet answer. Then decide whether people should follow. This is not less ambitious than sending humans quickly. In some ways, it is more ambitious because it aims not for a moment, but for a system. A footprint is a moment. A city is a long argument with reality. The first can be achieved by a mission. The second requires logistics, maintenance, redundancy, economics, politics, patience, and time. Mars will not care which one we want. It will only respond to what works. That may be the deepest lesson hidden inside the SpaceX plan. The company is often discussed through spectacle, launches, explosions, towers, engines, timelines, bold claims, giant vehicles, public promises. But underneath all of that is a colder and more interesting question. Can a human industrial system extend itself far enough, cheaply enough, and repeatedly enough to place working infrastructure on another planet before humans arrive? If yes, then Mars changes. Not physically in any grand sense. It remains cold, it remains dry, it remains difficult, but a human-made system begins to exist there. A thin one, a fragile one, a system that may fail many times before it lasts. But once continuity exists, history has a place to attach itself. The first city on Mars may not look like a city to the people watching from Earth. It may look like nothing much. A silver ship, a few panels, some tracks, a robot, a tank, a mast, a clearing in the dust. But every city, if you go back far enough, has a moment when it barely exists. A first shelter, a first storehouse, a first path, a first fire, a first reason to come back. On Mars, the first fire may be electrical. The first path may be a robot track. The first storehouse may be a landed starship. The first reason to come back may be a telemetry packet saying that the systems are still alive. And maybe, years later, when humans finally arrive, they will not feel that they are stepping into untouched wilderness. Maybe they will feel something stranger, that they are entering a place already prepared by the silent work of machines. A place that has been waiting for them. A place where the first chapter was written in power curves, dust measurements, tank pressures, and boot sequences. The human moment will still matter. Of course it will. The first person to stand on Mars will cross a threshold no human being has crossed. Their words will be remembered. Their face, if we see it, will become part of history. The image will be replayed for generations. It will be one of the great symbolic moments of our species if it comes. But it may not be the beginning. It may be the moment the beginning becomes visible. The true beginning may have happened years earlier when a machine woke alone and continued. When a cargo ship landed and remained useful. When a fuel plant made the first measurable return propellant. When a solar array survived its first dust storm. When a base with no people held itself together from one launch window to the next. That is the version of Mars this video has been following. Not Mars as fantasy. Mars as preparation. Mars as logistics. Mars is a place where the first Martians may be machines because only machines can arrive early enough, fail safely enough, and wait long enough to make human arrival something other than a gamble. And perhaps that is not a disappointing future. Perhaps it is the only future serious enough for the planet. A dead world does not become a home because someone declares it one. It becomes a home, slowly, if systems survive. If people return, if cargo keeps coming, if failures are absorbed, if the first fragile line between planets grows stronger instead of snapping. The first city on Mars may stand empty for years, but if it stands, if it works, if it waits, then emptiness itself becomes a kind of promise. A promise that one day the machines may no longer be alone, and now, after following the machines all the way to Mars, you do not need to solve any of it tonight. Mars will still be there when you close your eyes, moving quietly along its orbit, cold, red, distant, and patient. The dust will still be lying across its plains. The thin atmosphere will still move over rocks and craters and ancient riverbeds. The sun will still rise there, smaller and weaker than it does here, touching a world that has never heard a human voice carried through open air. The starships have not built the city yet. The robots have not walked there yet. The first empty base has not woken in the dust. For now, it exists as a plan, a sequence, a dream made of steel, software, methane, oxygen, windows, tankers, engines, batteries, cables, and machines that may someday go where human bodies are not yet ready to follow. And maybe that is enough to hold for a moment. Not certainty, not destiny. Only the strange possibility that the first step toward a human future on Mars may not be a human step at all. It may be a signal from a machine, a power reading, a camera opening, a solar panel unfolding, a robot standing very still under an alien sky, a tank beginning to fill, a base with no people, quietly refusing to die. If that day comes, it may not look like the beginning of a city. It may look small, industrial, awkward, unfinished. It may look like a few machines scattered across a cold plain, waiting through dust and darkness for the next launch window. But every large human story begins somewhere smaller than the story it becomes. A path before a road, a shelter before a town, a signal before a voice, a machine before a Martian. And if one day people do arrive, if they step down into the red dust and look around at the systems that came before them, they may understand something we're only beginning to understand now, that Mars was not made reachable by courage alone. It was made reachable by patience, by preparation, by the quiet work of machines sent ahead into the dark. So let the thought drift now. Let the red planet remain where it is. Let the rockets rest on their pads. Let the robots sleep in factories on Earth, not yet covered in Martian dust. Let the first city remain unbuilt for a little while longer. There is no need to hurry there in your mind. If you enjoyed this slow voyage through Mars machines and the strange future waiting between them, you are welcome to subscribe to Cosmic Calm. New quiet journeys are made for nights like this, for curiosity without noise, wonder without urgency, and stories large enough to disappear into. For now, there is nowhere to go and nothing more to hold on to. Sleep well, and good night.